Meet Reid Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reid is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reid.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, and around the globe. Reid Lance Rosenthal, Right Side Radio on the Right Side Radio, and the Cowboys Take on all sorts of video channels. So whether you are listening to me or watching me, please, #1, pass on the links just like other shows like this that you like, because information is kind of key. It's been key in the past. It's going to be even more key in the future. Because the powers that be, folks, why don't we just say you are not their first thought in the morning, unless it's how to get into your pocket or control your lives. And give us a like. Give us a subscription, if you would. Ring the little bell if you happen to be on one of those sites that has a little bell thing. You know, I like this video, whatever. All right, well, today I promised you my grade, my self-grading, and you can chip right in, on last year's prognostications and to give you this year's forecasts. Additionally, there's a bunch of stuff that has happened in the last 4 or 5 days. I'm back within 1 day of schedule here, so we're closing in on it. But there's been a bunch of stuff which has come to light and happened in the last 4 or 5 days. I'm going to give you a brief rat-a-tat-tat at the front of the show. Economic and some other things which are really quite concerning going into the new year. And then I'm going to give you the grade, the report card, the self-report card on last year's forecast, and give you this year's forecast. We'll see how well we do this time next year, assuming we're all here. Yeah, that's right. All right. Let's start off with a rant story, and then we'll do, it's not a founder's quote, but it's a great quote, particularly given the content of this show. So last week I told you about, or the last show, I told you about the trials and tribulations of our poor ranch lieutenant. 2 deaths in the family within a month, one on Christmas morning. And, the tale continues because his grandmother died literally this morning, the same day I'm doing this show. And most of you will see this show on a Saturday or a Sunday, whenever the various sites get it posted. I noticed that Google there, who doesn't like me much and I don't like them much, and YouTube the same, they really take their time posting these shows. They'll post them 5 or 6 days after all the other sites. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. But anyway, this poor guy has had quite the 30 days. So I don't really have a rant story for you, but this is a happening which affects the ranch. It's on the ranch. But it's a happening that affects us all, because in the end, folks, right, death is a certainty. And whether it's the death of a loved one, of a friend, or of yourself, it's going to happen. You just don't know when, you don't know how, you don't know how quick or how long it'll be, which makes that time that you are alive, breathing, kicking, and in good health all the more valuable. Don't squander it. Don't squander it. All right. The quote I'm going to give you today, given that this is the report card for last year's forecast and the going forward intuitive thoughts of your cowboy here, your Wyoming hayseed. This is from J.R. Tolkien. Famous guy. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him, unquote. Well, today we're going to be talking about some dragons. The dragons past 2024, who unfortunately, or whom I should say, unfortunately, are still breathing fire in many cases, in fact, intensifying fire. And we're going to talk about some potential upcoming dragons in this show, which you need to be alert to. And hopefully they will not emerge from their cave, But if they do, it pays to think about them in advance, folks. It pays to think about them in advance. You know, in preparing for this show, I listened to one of the shows from the beginning of last year, which was on the history of the Constitution and on preparedness. And I'll tell you, it was really pretty good. And I think sometime in the next few weeks, I have several shows I want to do. Next week will be Millet, the incredible success he is having with radical Austrian economics, i.e., conservative economics and politics in Argentina, despite the naysayers, you know, the globalists and their mouthpieces in the press saying that he could never get it done. He's kicking butt down there. We're going to talk about what he's doing and how Trump can employ the lessons being learned and being taught by Milei in Argentina right here in the United States, because the first 90 to 180 days of Trump's term are going to be really critical, really critical. And by the way, the Democratic progressives, spelled communists, know that too. So expect all sorts of nonsense, which we'll get into in the forecast. First of all, the rat-a-tat-tat. Okay, this is a pile of stuff. I'm going to go through it very quickly. But we know the government's lying to us about everything. We know they've been lying to us about the economy. I've been bringing you these stats all the way through for the course of this year. But in the last week, there have been revisions to formerly optimistic, rosy optimistic projections and supposedly statistics and compilations and, you know, reporting by the government and the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It seems that they were reporting right up to a week ago that in Cadaver's last term, Obama's third term, they had created 2.4 million jobs in the last 12 months. Well, we know there were downward revisions to that, of course, across the course of the year, but this is a whopper. They, I'm not making this up. They actually revised it down 50% to 1.2 million. I mean, you know, these are our government statisticians. They should know what they're doing, right? Yeah, 1.2 million jobs instead of 2.4 million jobs. Okay, pretty major. And also ties in with one of the things I told you last week, which is all these, should we say, pent up demand revisions. In other words, the corrections of their previous lies. They're going to be dumping here going into the inauguration and within a month of Trump taking office so they can try to pin the tail on the Trump donkey. That's what they're doing. Number two, all those different jobs that, gee, really didn't exist, that were never created, that altered the amount of personal income in the United States from 91 billion, this is kind of a monthly figure, 91 billion to 64 billion. That's about a third drop, folks. Now, obviously, if a consumer has less money, or the collective consumers have less money, there's going to be less money spent, which affects the economy, which affects GDP, which affects companies, which affects employment. You know, the hip bone's connected to the funny bone. It's all connected. So, and they revised that too. And they kind of said, gee, you know, our household survey, which by the way has been pretty accurate throughout the year, I've been bringing those stats. The household survey was 1.89 million new jobs, not 2.4 million jobs. It looks like the household survey came out right again. It's amazing what happens when you talk to the actual people who have jobs or don't have jobs, rather than sitting in your cubicle and getting orders from Obama and Soros as to what the mainstream media will print or not print, which is about anything you tell them. Oh, um, state and local government, this is a scary figure, is now a bit over 45%. That's 45%. That's almost 50% of America's GDP. That's right. The salaries they pay, the monies they spend, the graft they dole out is now 45 plus percent of the entire economy of the United States. Doge could not come soon enough. Don't you agree? All right. Um, FHA mortgages, they are now, in terms of delinquencies, at the same level they were in 2008, 2009. We all know what kind of happened there, the great financial crisis. 10% and climbing. 10% of all FHA mortgages are in default. And the percentage of private mortgages, that is non-government mortgages, not FHA, is also rising. It's not yet at the 2008 levels, but it's approaching them. Credit card debt surged again. You had Christmas, understandable, but it's now at record levels, surpassing 2008. Credit card delinquencies is now right in the realm of 2008, 2009. But we're not in a recession, folks. No, we've never been in a recession. You worry your pretty little heads, because we're just fine. This economy is just robust with its 1.2 million jobs. 3/4 of the new jobs of that downward revised 1.2 million were part-time. We've lost more than 700,000, in fact, approaching 800,000 full-time jobs over the course of the year. I don't need to tell you folks what the difference is there in terms of people, families, ability to afford things, ability to spend, economy, etc. And car delinquencies are now approaching record highs. Credit card delinquencies are approaching record highs. Doesn't sound like a recession to me. Does it sound like one to you? I think it's great. I think we're just rocking along. I've been warning you for several years, but particularly in the last year, and particularly over the last 6 months, about what I unfortunately think is going to be a series of pretty significant terror attacks across the United States. Number one, because Iran and the jihadis have always wanted to do it. Number two, because they've all managed to smuggle themselves in, well, actually been greeted and transported wherever they want to go across the southern border over the last 4 years. And they have ingrained themselves in many, many communities, places, and cities across the country. So, unfortunately, over the last several days, as you're well aware, and listen, by the time this goes out, there may be another one. You've had 3 terror events. The first, of course, is that abhorrent mass killing. 15 people, I think, died, including the Islamic terrorist himself in New Orleans when he used a truck as a weapon and then shot it out with the cops. And the FBI immediately came out, of course, and said, oh, this isn't a terror attack. Later, they retracted that. But I mean, really? This is how woke the FBI has become under Barry and Cadaver? Unbelievable, boy. I'll tell you what, Kash Patel has a huge job ahead of him at the FBI. I mean, just huge job. And the special agent in charge down there, I actually watched it on a video. I watched it twice. She takes out her nose rings before she goes on camera to do a press conference. I want you to think about that, okay? That is the FBI, at least down there in New Orleans. We know what the FBI is in Washington. All right. Then we have the nightclub shooting. 11 people shot to death and other people wounded. And the 2 perps magically get away. Wow. How did that happen? And they don't have a clue who they are. Wow. How did that happen? I'll give you a clue to who they are. They are Islamic radicals who came across the southern border. Now, in the case of New Orleans, this was a, believe it or not, former Army soldier who they say, now you can't believe anything that you're told, was radicalized only in the last year. All right. Had an ISIS flag in the truck with him. And then the third one was the, shall we say, not faked blow up, but staged fire event in the Tesla truck in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, supposedly by an active duty, all sorts of commendations, seems totally normal, great operator, an active duty Green Beret, Special Forces. And there's some speculation, I might add, that he didn't really die in that fireworks display, which was set off in that Tesla truck. Nobody got hurt. It's obvious the way he planned it that he didn't intend anybody to get hurt. He was trying to draw attention to things. And he has sent several emails to news outlets. It's really fascinating. I have a video on the site. It's under the audio bar, Rat-tat-tat, and Terror, and Family Safety. Several of them, actually, and you should watch it. I think that there are other things in the works. Whether or not they're planning like one or two big ones simultaneously. You have these nuke-sniffing drones in New York, New Jersey, Maryland, etc., which, by the way, these videos talk about also, and they think it might be something else even more dangerous, Chinese anti-gravitational devices. It's really quite interesting. I have no prognostication on this, not my field of expertise. But I think everything has a reason and there are no coincidences. How's that? We'll talk about what I think is going to happen on the terror front. And one of the things, or several of the things you can do to try and protect yourselves and your family in the upcoming year, in the forecast section of the show. And then we have the bird flu, right? We have the media, the mainstream media, legacy media, yes, legacy for sure. And the government and the CDC beginning to beat the drums over, 60% of people die, and it's all over the place, and it's in cows, and it's in milk, and it's in poultry, and it's in humans, and oh my God. The reality, folks, is, and we have the articles on the website, the avian bird flu, as it's currently known, is not really transmissible between humans, number one. Number two, has a very, very low death rate, resembles flu, kind of like COVID. And it just so happens that the government has already spent billions of your tax money buying vaccines from Big Pharma. Go RFK and tearing down that castle. For avian bird flu. Oh, and by the way, they happen to be the same RMNA-based types of vaccines that were so unsuccessful in the COVID rollout, the fraudulent COVID rollout of jabs. So, wow. I guess they think, you fool them once, you can fool them twice. I think they're going to be really disappointed when this one comes around. Really disappointed. No, I will not comply. Great sentence. It's a great sentence. There continues to be deterioration in countries around the world. South Korea, I've been talking to you about that the last 2 weeks, has now gone under martial law. There's some talk that the president has been arrested. It's a really murky bottom over there. Okay. France continues to deteriorate. Canada is literally on its knees. And Great Britain is following closely behind. Germany is basically economic toast. And Italy is following in the path of Germany. In the meantime, the Ukraine war grinds on, and Putin, much to his common sense credit, is waiting for Trump to get in the office, rattling his sabers and grabbing more territory so he has a bargaining chip. Quite interesting. We'll talk about it in the forecast. Anyway, the New Orleans event also led police to discover that this maniac who killed these poor people on Bourbon Street had planted, or an accomplice had planted. They were very quick to come out and say there's nobody else involved. Now, all of a sudden, there's a massive manhunt on for somebody else who's involved. It's unbelievable. But now they have discovered IEDs, right? Roadside bombs, throughout New Orleans. Think about that in your current town, city, interstate, you name it. I have an interesting anecdote for you. A friend of mine, when all this came out, let me know that when they were traveling across country late last year, they stopped somewhere along I-80, some like, second-rate gas station, basically, gets no traffic, etc. And I don't know why, but they chose that gas station. And they walked in, and there was a room with kind of a plexiglass, heavy plexiglass, see-through wall and a door. And inside the room were between 20 and 30 foreign men, ranging in ages, they estimated, from about 18 to about 30. Most of them bearded. They felt pretty certain they were Middle East. And the two folks running the store at the counter, one was kind of standing behind the guy taking the money, kind of like backup, shall we say. And both of them were of the same origin, nationality, region as the people in the room. The people in the room were not talking. They were sitting at tables with no food or coffee. They were mostly bearded. And out in the parking lot, there were a number of vans that can carry, 8 to 10 people, the kind of the airport shuttle type vans. And they were westbound on I-80. And this was at night in the dark. Now, whatever they were doing, I have my own feelings, but I think what they ran into was a terrorist cell on the move. That's just my personal opinion. But there's an awful lot of dots, and they seem to connect. We shall see. We shall see. And where they wound up, or how they split up, or what they really were, I asked them specifically, did you see their hands? Did their hands look like roughened, like they were farm workers? And they said definitively no. They didn't have rancher or farmer hands. So whoever these people were, I guess will remain a mystery, we hope, forever. Or maybe they will reveal themselves in some nefarious way in the future, and others like them. One of the videos I have on the site will tell you that, and this is a former CIA expert, and she says that there are at least 1,000 IGRC trained, that is, the Iranian military forces, trained terrorists in the United States, both Al Qaeda and ISIS. Folks, do you know how much damage 1,000 people can do acting in concert or alone, whether synchronized or unsynchronized? Think about it. Think about it. One of the things that you can do to protect yourself against this type of nonsense is to be armed. The Second Amendment is there for a reason. You shouldn't be going anywhere right now without packing a gun, legally, I might add, whatever your local state and county jurisdictions have to say. But you need to have a firearm. You need to be trained in its safe use, and you should be carrying right now, wherever you go, for whatever reason. That's one thing that you can do to perhaps, hopefully, never have to find out. Help yourselves and others. All right, let's get into our forecast and report card, shall we? Put my notes back up here. Hopefully they won't fall over like they usually do. It's called gravity. All right, last year, and we're going to broad brush this. I told you that the Democrats, the progressive communists, would intentionally try to grow the debt and deficits because it's part of the Cloward-Piven theory. You overwhelm capitalism and democracy through entitlements and expenditures until the snowball gets too big to stop to roll down the hill. And they've been doing it for years. And I might add that some of the Republican presidents have been doing it for years. George Bush, are you listening? But this definitely occurred, and it occurred on steroids. A $2+ trillion deficit, and we've now hit 36 trillion plus in national debt. And they're happy as clams. Oh, don't worry about it. This is modern monetary theory, MMT. We can spend all we want, not a problem. We'll just print our way out of it. Yeah, okay. Ask Rome about that, or ancient Greece about that, or Athens, or Sparta, or I can go down the list. I told you that inflation would continue, that it would have a dip, but that it would remain high and the government would underreport it, i.e., lie to you. And that certainly happened. Shadow statistics right now, this is shadowstatistics.com. I've told you about it many times. Says inflation is about 7+% right now. If you've been to the grocery store, you know what inflation is. Okay. And inflation here is less than inflation in most other Western countries. China is suffering from deflation. I mean, their economy, while in some respects it's not as bad as many economists say, their economy has some severe hiccups right now in certain sectors. Remember that inflation is computed by the government who reports to you so accurately and so timely without without food, shelter, and fuel, because who needs that? So if you add those babies in there, inflation is rip-roaring, folks, and you ain't seen nothing yet. We'll get to that in the forecast. Okay, I told you that the government will continue to, and the mainstream media, in concert with the government, being the state's mouthpiece, would continue to snowball you, if you will, on what was happening geopolitically. Two ways. They would just not tell you, or they would lie to you. And all this happened. I mean, if you listen to these people after Biden just sent the Ukraine another $2.6 billion of our tax money prior to Trump coming in, wow, it's unbelievable. I mean, it really is. I think he sent 7 billion, give or take a billion, who cares, to Ukraine in the last month, knowing full well, if you take a look at an electoral map of the United States by county, it is a sea of red. Okay, don't look at it with the states, look at it by the county. I mean, it's just some pinpricks of blue here and there. So this truly is as much of a mandate as you're going to get in modern day America with our schizophrenic dual personality. And yet the Democrats, Barry in his third term, Soros behind him, Cadaver out front, stuttering and falling all over himself, they don't care. I mean, they're in it for the long haul. They're in it to fundamentally change America. I told you that lawfare would intensify, and it has. There's just all sorts of nonsense going on. I don't know if you know, but Merchan, the corrupt judge in New York, whose daughter has made millions fundraising for the Democrats, I mean, he doesn't have a conflict of interest, does he? He is moving ahead with sentencing Trump for the bogus trial back there on the hush money payments to the bimbos. He's moving ahead with sentencing him next Friday. Next Friday. This is a week before, give or take, the inauguration. Okay. Now, some pundits say, "Oh, he's just going to dismiss the case," blah blah blah. No, I think this is all part of a plan, folks. We'll see what happens, and that's not going to be the only surprise that comes our way between now and inauguration. I flat guarantee you. Flat guarantee you. You know, spurred by Virginia parents in that big victory by Youngkin, the current governor out there, which was great in Virginia several years ago, I told you that parents would become more and more vocal, more and more involved and become a tighter knit political bloc in the coming year. This was a year ago. And that in fact happened. It seems that parents, this is a two-parent household for the most part, parents went overwhelmingly for Trump, unlike in previous elections. And we see all sorts of great changes in school boards across the country. Project 1776, they're on the Take Action page if you want to contribute to them, doing a great job turning the school indoctrination into actually an educational experience for kids. So I was right on that one. So far, I've been kind of right on everything I've told you. I told you that Ukraine would be a disaster in 2024. Ukraine has been more than a disaster. Several 100,000 more people have lost their lives of all nationalities. The country is in shambles. The United States and the West have pumped another 100 billion, whatever they pumped in there, into that dead rabbit hole over the last year, 5 billion or so in the last month out of our pockets. I mean, it's really, when we voted against it, right? Who cares, right? Democracy. We need to save democracy, folks. And Ukraine's going to be more of a disaster before Trump gets in there and hopefully gets it fixed. And I think he will. I'm not sure NATO will be happy with how he fixes it, but I think he'll get it fixed. I told you that the Mideast would ignite. In fact, I was surprised that it took until October 7th for that all to happen. And the Mideast did indeed ignite, and it's still under ignition. I mean, the fire is spreading over there with the collapse of Syria, our hand-holding with Al-Qaeda, who now runs Syria. Unbelievable. Along those lines, in Afghanistan, it's come out in the last several weeks, and I told you this was going on a year ago. The money we are sending Afghanistan, which is many tens of millions of dollars a month, billions a year, is being taken by the Taliban, who now runs Afghanistan, and being given to NGOs to launder it. And the NGOs are financing training for both ISIS elements and Al-Qaeda elements, including elements here in this country, according to that CIA analyst. Once again, the video is on the site. I mean, really? We're paying for terrorism training for terrorists who can commit and will commit and want to commit terrorist acts within our domestic borders. Now, if you don't think the powers that be hate America and hate you, I don't know what else will bring it home to you. I really don't know. The BRICS countries. I told you a year ago that they would start to consolidate, that more would be added, that they would begin to not just talk about, but begin to formulate at least the rough structure of an alternate currency to the United States dollar. That all happened. Go back and listen to my show on Project Mbridge and some of the other shows I've done on the BRICS. Just type in the search bar, ontherightsideradio.com. It's also ontherightsideradio.com if you want to see these videos, read these articles, etc. Everything I'm telling you about, there's something posted on. I told you that the dollar would slip in terms of international esteem, and it has by several percentage points. And that slippage, unfortunately, is going to continue. We'll talk about it in the forecast section. I told you that the long-term bond trend, that is T-bills, T-bonds, long-term treasuries, kind of the stuff that's the foundation of long-term car loans, house loans, all that stuff, would dip and then begin to go up. And the same with the Federal Reserve rates, shall we say. The Federal Reserve is a joke. And that's exactly what has happened. In fact, when they cut rates the last time, long-term bonds, which propel mortgages and all sorts of other things, that the common everyday American kind of relies on in the course of their life went up. And they went up a lot, like between 0.5% and 1%, because the economy is broken, intentionally broken. The financial system on which the economy is based is, shall we say, underwater, intentionally underwater, the Cloward and Piven theory. I told you that we would probably experience black swan events, and that'll be part of my forecast for this coming year too. And we did. We did. We had 2 assassination attempts on Trump. I would call them black swan events. I mean, really black swan events had either been, unfortunately, horribly successful. We had the October 7th Hamas invasion of Israel. And then we had the Israeli invasion of the Gaza Strip. And then we had the exchange of blows between Iran and Israel. And we can go on and on. I mean, there were other lesser black swan events. Well, black swans are going to be part of our life here in 2025. And a black swan between now and inauguration, which hopefully will never occur, is entirely possible. Because the deep state and the powers that be and the elite really don't want to see you, that's you and me, get into office, which is really what Trump and his people are. They are you and me. That's why they got elected. And I forecast, and I was wrong on this, a significant recession starting last year. Now, I was wrong on it for several, I was wrong, period. End of, period, end of sentence. But the reason I was wrong is important because it ties into my forecasts. And that is that this economy, people's minds were screwed with all these false reports. They thought it might be better than it was. And a lot of economy and a lot of the dollar is people's faith in it, their belief. A lot of this is psychological. And they screwed with your mind, as they tend to do, right? Big psyops program, which was at least partially successful, at least up to the election. And then I think it kind of crumbled. And it's certainly crumbling now. So the significant recession that I thought we were going to have in 2024 has been postponed. But in its postponement lies the rub, because now it's going to be even more significant. It's kind of like when you boil water and you screw a top on it so it can't boil over. Eventually the top is going to blow, and with much more force than if you'd let the boiling take place to begin with. Which gets us, and I guess it's a good segue, into my forecast for this year. I think that there's going to be reprehensibly and horribly further attempts on Trump's life, and I think on the lives of some of his key staff and cabinet members. I mean, the threats are already out there. I think the next 15 days are one of the most dangerous periods in American history since this nation was founded, from now to the inauguration and perhaps the day or two after. Any amount of black swans or false flags, in other words, deep state initiated blow-ups, if you will, that are then blamed on a foreign country or a foreign group or terrorists or whatever. I hope I'm wrong, but I think something like that is entirely possible between now and inauguration or shortly thereafter. In terms of terror, which this kind of leads into, I think the United States is in for a very rough year. I don't know if it's going to be a series of lone wolf attacks like we saw in New Orleans or we saw in the nightclub deal over the last few days, whether there's going to be a bunch of simultaneous lone wolf actions at various points in time where there's like 50 of them around the United States on the same day, or whether they're just going to be every Monday, every Wednesday, every Friday. But I'm pretty sure they're coming. And they're going to pick venues. Use your common sense. They're going to pick venues where they can do the most damage, which goes back to my thoughts here when we were going over my report card, which, by the way, I guess I give myself like a 95% on, since I was wrong about the recession. It's something to keep in mind. You need to be alert. I told you that little anecdote about this friend traveling on I-80 and what they saw, and it gave him the creeps. And I asked him, well, did you report it to the State Patrol? Did you report it to anybody? No. That has to change, folks. See something, say something. Really important. And keep your eyes open. Keep your senses alert. Keep the antenna dish circulating. Okay? Keep the radar dish circulating and the antennas up. All right. Conflict. Oh, I might add that these next 15 days, particularly with this sudden, I'm going to sentence Trump, the Friday more or less before the inauguration, could also result in a constitutional crisis. And you may see Democrats try and implement their plan. They've been talking about it. I mean, they're out in the open about trying to not certify the electors for Trump and to try and install Harris instead. These are the same people who jumped up and down about J6, of course. Yeah. We're going to save democracy and all that kind of stuff. All right. So conflict. There's going to be international conflict, and it's going to be increasing. Ukraine may be one of those places where it gets damped down, depending upon what Trump and Putin can get agreed. And if NATO and the neocons and the deep state allow that agreement to exist. But everywhere else, China, Taiwan, Africa, particularly, we'll get to that in a moment, South America, Mexico and the U.S., Canada and the U.S., which of course won't be shooting wars, but there will be lots of friction. And Russia and the U.S. in other parts of the globe, such as the Mideast, which will continue to boil, and in my opinion, accelerate to boiling over. We shall see. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. I mean, peace on earth, goodwill toward men would be a really good thing to achieve, but that's not what I see happening in 2025 at all. One good thing is that Trump and his boys will be in office, and he's an unknown quantity, but he's known to take decisive action and not be afraid to use military might, intelligence, surgical strikes, and everybody has to be thinking about that around the planet right now. Cadaver was, cadaver. And Barry Obama was a cheerleader for all these nasty things happening in other places because it undermines the United States. So they didn't have to worry about it for the last 4 years, but now they do. Hopefully that will have the same type of dampening effect it did in his first term, where no wars were started. I think you're going to see, I think there's a high likelihood, at least, of a attack on Iran by Israel with the help of the United States. Whether or not this is a kinetic attack, planes and bombs and missiles and all that kind of stuff, or whether this is a more subtle attack, kind of like when they decapitated Hezbollah with that incredible pager blow up synchronized thing they did. I mean, amazing. And whether or not the Israeli attack is kinetic or cyber or special forces or something that is not really kinetic, Iran is going to retaliate, and they've signed a defense pact with Russia, and Russia is keen to keep its influence in the Mideast, which has been sorely undermined in Syria. So there's all sorts of dominoes there. And of course, China buys a lot of its oil from Iran, which of course Barry Obama and Biden allowed to happen despite the sanctions on Iran, because Barry Obama loves Iran, period. And as I've told you in previous shows, Iran has the bomb, folks. I mean, this is not the nonsense they've been feeding us for 2 years. We're days away. We can make 10 devices in 24 hours. No, BS. The devices are made and ready. Which, in a catch-22, is one of the reasons why I think an attack by Israel is imminent. They cannot afford to allow Iran to employ those nuclear weapons. One or two, and there is no more Israel. And Iran has been very vocal about the fact that they would love that result. Yes, they would. Jump up and down and clap like a seal eating a fish. I think Ukraine will resolve. I don't think it's going to be a resolution that NATO will be happy with. It's certainly not going to be a resolution that the neocons, the military-industrial complex, which is making all sorts of money at the expense of other people's, literally, lives, and the deep state is going to be happy with, but I think it will resolve. Tariffs. I don't think Trump's tariffs are going to have quite the bite that he's barking. I think there will be tariffs. I think they will have an effect. When I went over, and this was like 4 or 5 shows ago, very interesting set of 2 shows. On the rightsideradio.com, go to the search bar, just type in presidential and they should come up. What did other presidents do in similar circumstances over the last 230 years? And it's quite insightful. But the whole thing with Trump is that he has 4 years of experience as president, and he knows what he did wrong. And he has 4 years of thinking about what he needs to do, which makes him a much more effective and faster-paced leader than in his first term. And I think overall, not entirely, he's made better choices in terms of his cabinet and close advisors and department heads, agency heads. So all that is positive. On the negative side, the Democrats are going to pull every dirty trick in the book. There's going to be increased, if that's possible, lawfare. They're going to sue over every single edict, every single executive order, every single law that they don't like. And they're going to try at the least to bog it down, and at least to bog it down to the midterms where they hope, we'll talk about this in a moment, where they hope they can retake control of at least the House and then really stop Trump and maybe launch a few more, conjured impeachments or whatever they are what they are. They are who they are. They will do what they do. Europe. Europe is toast, folks. I can't tell you what bad shape Europe is in. It's in really bad shape. Its leading economy, Germany, is in the tank. 6.5% unemployment and climbing, and that's the government figure, so who knows what it really is. GDP down, tens of thousands laid off from Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, their 2 big car manufacturers. Very expensive energy because, they want to do the Green New Deal and etc. And they are really in a world of hurt. Great Britain is close behind them. France is close behind them. Europe is really toast. I think you may see some really big cracks and fissures in the entire European Union this year. And what effect that would have on world politics and the balance of power in the world, the new order, if you want to call it that, the rising access of Russia, China, the BRICS, I don't know. But I don't think it's beneficial overall to the United States position. The populist movement, which is about to replace the government in France, is working on replacing the government in Britain, is about to replace, we hope. Trudy up there, God, he's just disgusting. and his liberal government in Canada that replaced the communist government in Argentina, and I can go on down the list. I think you're going to see that grow. That's a big wave gathering momentum, particularly as you see populist elected, nationalistic elected, Austrian economic, pure economics, not print money. Leaders elected who get the job done, like Milei is doing in Argentina, as we're going to discuss next week. Fascinating story. More and more people are going to climb on the populist nationalist wagon, and that's good. We need to be a planet of nations. We don't need to be globalist sheep. Black swans. We are absolutely going to have black swans. I don't know what they're going to be. I don't know how big they're going to be, how detrimental they're going to be, but they will happen. Those are our alarms. We have sensors out on the perimeter of the ranch, just in case somebody's deciding to visit me who is not wanted. Good luck on that. These black swans could take many forms, including those that I can't even anticipate and none of us can imagine. You could have a pandemic. They're ramping up this avian flu nonsense, like, we're going to take the bait twice after their COVID fraud. It could be some other types of pathogen, which Dr. Fauci and his evil elves have conjured up and are continuing to work on in the gain of function sense in laboratories around the planet, hidden from the American eyes and lied about to Congress. It could be an EMP event. It could have something to do, listen to the videos on the website, on the rightsideradio.com. It could have something to do with this drone stuff over the East Coast and the fact that in the video they think they're Chinese anti-gravitational devices. It's a fascinating video, so watch it. I'm not going to get into the details here. I'm not a scientist. It could be something domestic within the country. For instance, the Democrats trying not to certify Trump and getting part of the way there. Or Merchan, that crooked judge in New York, saying Trump has to go to jail. Wow. You talk about a constitutional crisis, and you talk about people who are pissed off, and a country violently at odds with itself. Welcome to that ball game. And it could be this series of terror events, which unfortunately I really think we're in for. It could be large, it could be small, it could be a series of small, it could be synchronized in some way, shape, or form. But we have too many people. We've let too many people intentionally, under the Democratic Progressive Communists, into this country who hate this country and who are trained and military age to think you can't bury your head in the sand and think this isn't going to happen. It is going to happen. It's a question of where, when, and how devastating and how synchronized. And all those things will have an effect on the economy and on the banks and on the financial system. And in that regard, you're going to see taxes come down, which will, at least over the year or two after that cut in taxes, stimulate the economy and actually generate, and this has been proven time and time again, more tax revenues, not less tax revenues to the federal government. I think you're going to see deregulation, which will spur the economy. But I think you're going to see, why don't we just say the stock market is not going to behave as it has the last few years. How's that? And the stock market is really kind of the kettle holding the tea of most people's wealth right now, which is kind of a scary thought. If you don't want to lose all your wealth, you have 5 kettles, or you don't want to lose all your tea, you have 5 kettles of tea. If you spill 1 or 2, you still got 3. But if you have it all in one kettle and she dumps out on the floor, well, then you're kind of SOL, aren't you? And a lot of people could be SOL, which of course would have highly deleterious and detrimental effects on the national economy and for each and every one of us and our families. I think you're going to see inflation continue, although we're going to see a deflation for a period in hard assets and certain services, and it won't be long-lived, because I think by the end of 2025, you're going to see inflation coming back with a vengeance that even the government can't cover up, even by leaving out food, fuel, and housing. And that's going to affect the dollar, and that's going to affect your pocketbook. It's going to affect all sorts of things, and it's going to affect the banks and the bond markets. And the bond markets are really the backbone of the financial system. And if the bond markets get into trouble, in other words, there is no liquidity. You can't buy or sell bonds. The market freezes, kind of like what the housing market is right now. You could have a big time financial event, and you could have the Fed out there printing who knows what, 5 trillion, 10 trillion. I mean, I've heard some analysts say $20 trillion within a short period of time, in which case, since money supply is the foundation of inflation, the more money you have, the less each piece, each dollar is worth. That could have huge effects on all sorts of assets and, of course, on every aspect of the economy and your personal situation. And I think you're going to see the Dems throw every roadblock they can imagine, that you can think of, and some that you haven't thought of, in the path, in the highway of Trump, if you will. And that is not going to be great for lovey-dovey kumbaya. Let's bring the country together, which they don't want to do. They want just the opposite. Attempts by the new administration coming in. So that's my forecast for the coming year. There's bright spots in it too. I think education is going to improve dramatically. Parents will have more and more control of local boards, educational processes, and schools. I think the quality of education is going to improve. Indoctrination will slowly dissipate. I think this whole trans, whatever it is, movement, which is a tiny, tiny minority of the country, is going to, if not sputter out entirely, at least be put in deep freeze. How's that? And I see and I feel a social turnaround in the battleship America. I mean, what was not fashionable or allowed to say just 3 or 4 months ago is now kind of out in the mainstream. And that's a good thing for us. Free speech is kind of the foundation of our republic. But you need to be prepared for whatever occurs. If I'm wrong, everything is hunky-dory. If you're prepared, you will enjoy it even more. If I'm half right and you're prepared, you'll be able to, shall we say, extract the nuggets and keep the nuts. And if I'm right, then you need to be prepared, because your safety, your health, your welfare, that of your family, your freedoms, and your finances will be at risk. So that's Reid Lance Rosenthal's thoughts for the upcoming 2025, for what it's worth. This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio, the Cowboys Take. Hope you had a great New Year's. Have a happy, wealthy, and healthy one upcoming. Use your head, common sense, follow your instincts, see something, say something. Don't go anywhere and not be armed, so long as you do it legally, safely, and you're trained in the use of that tool. We'll talk at you next week, and we'll talk about Milei and his miracle down there in Argentina. The miracle of common sense and somebody who doesn't back down. Until then, keep the wind at your back.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.